would say, see, Christians have this cool thing called the Christian church where we meet together around God and he's present. See, kind of in Cain's situation, God is going to be protecting Cain. And in that way, he's touched with God's presence. Now, but does Cain really know the Lord's forgiveness? We know the Lord's forgiveness because we have it proclaimed on a Sunday in his word, in his holy supper. We join together and then we partake. We know where God is. Wherever two or three are gathered in my name, there he is. And there he is to give gifts. Cain is not in that presence anymore. God is everywhere, but he's only there for you for certain in the Lord's Supper. As I always, or in the word, in his grace. People say, oh, I feel closer to God when I'm, walking in nature. That's true. You are close to the majesty of God. And yeah, this is all wonderful. And you don't even deserve to be walking in the nature of God. But to actually know you have the forgiveness of sins, you don't find that underneath a leaf or on a path. You find that in the Word. And that word's going to be reliable. Nature's beautiful, but nature is fickle. I always tell people, oh, you might go, oh, look at that bird. It's so wonderful. God's so glorious. But what happens when that bird pees on you? Which I've had happen in my life, and I didn't feel closer to God. Okay? But I can run to the forgiveness of sins and be certain of it. So, anyways, hopefully all that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But he is definitely out of the presence of God, but he's not out of God's protection.
Yeah. Well, God probably uses him for different bloodlines going in.
Well, that's kind of interesting because he says you're going to be a wanderer. And it sounds as if he's never going to settle down. But then it says that he did settle down and he seems to have gotten married. And so, but maybe part of the presence that he desired, or the presence isn't there though, of God and God's people.
Yeah. Was he saved, do you think, or do you think he went to hell?
I have no idea. I'm going to leave that
doesn't-
one up to God.
Oh, okay. It didn't specify in here.
It didn't specify, and what's interesting is who is he afraid of? It must be family members are like, you killed my uncle.
Who's out there?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question too. People don't believe in the story of Adam and Eve, because for one, as our little brains can handle, it doesn't make sense that we all came from just two people. Even though in our genetics, I'm pretty sure scientists have proven that we actually did come from two, like in two gene types, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But I think people have a hard time understanding and believing the story of Adam and Eve because, all the different cultures, all the different types of people, and stuff.
Well, the Bible gives that actually a little bit of an explanation of that all the world gets scattered at the Tower of Babylon after the flood. At the same time, when people get scattered and if they get stuck in a certain area, sometimes people might call this bottlenecked, where they're kind of there. Then you get all these perhaps even mutations in genes, and then people wind up. The Bible doesn't tell us what color skin anybody, Adam and Eve, had. Probably it was, I would assume it was a darker skin. You can't stereotype them as being white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Adam and Eve. So you don't know, but all these changes that happen within the race. There's really, according to the Bible, if you go with this, everybody came from Adam and Eve. There's only one human race, okay, and they start off with a lot of genetic material, but the genetic material people, it allows for different changes. What I want to point out here, and it's a sad thing, but you see, God put a mark on Cain, and that throughout church history, people have used that to say, that's the first African American, that's the first black man. He had the mark and he was cursed. But see, what they're doing when they do that is just justifying something that's already going on. How do we justify slavery? Or how do we justify any form of racism, or that we're not going to, they should be treated differently, or it's okay to treat them differently, black people. Well, try to justify it with something you can find in scripture. But when you say mark, you would just think it was some kind of mark, you know. It doesn't say outright that his color changed, and even if his color did change, here's the deal: the curse was for him and him alone. He was going to be a wanderer.
Mhm.
It doesn't say, "And all your generations will be cursed."
Right.
It's on Cain.
Yeah.
Now, and if other times people have, we'll probably talk about it. We're going to hear about the curse of Ham, and not the food, but there actually is a guy named Ham. And then other people said, "Well, this is the curse of Ham. That's why African Americans have it so hard." I've even heard this stuff. I read this stuff in books from 20th century books, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Mhm.
But anyways, that's just people trying to justify something. And
Yeah.
okay, why is our lives like this? Oh, well, it's because this Cain got this mark.
Mhm.
You're just totally putting something on the text.
Right. And even so, like say with the slavery thing, if they were trying to use the Bible to justify the slavery thing,
Mhm.
following anyone who hurts Cain will will suffer vengeance 7 times over. So,
Oh man, so that puts you right there. So slave owners who abuse their slaves would be cursed by God.
right.
They would suffer death probably
Worst.
7 times over, so
Right.
perhaps even death. So
Perhaps, yeah.
yeah.
No paradise for
Oh, see, I didn't even notice that, Shannon. That's amazing. And then back to the theme of going further and further east of Eden, further and further away from God's presence. That's what Cain does. And then the text starts talking about descendants of Cain, and they're even worse. We wind up with this guy named Lamech, and he says, "You know what? I killed a person, and I'm proud of it. Uh, at least, at least Cain tried to hide his murder. This guy's like, I killed him, and if anybody harms me, if Cain is avenged 7 times over, oh, what does he say? I'm gonna check it out. It's in the last verse if you have that open up or near the last
4.
verse. Chapter 4, verse 24. If Cain
Oh.
is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. I'm going to make people really pay if they hurt me. Okay. Cain hurt this person, so I'm going to hurt him even worse. How can you hurt him more than death? I'm not sure, but maybe I'm going to go after their family members. But this murderous thing in humanity just continues. Oh, Cain got punished because he hurt another person. Well, I'm really gonna hurt people,
Mhm.
and he's very open about it. And here's another thing: this guy is the first guy recorded in Scripture to have multiple wives. And it's not for anything political, at least it doesn't say that in the text. It's not because he needs to have some children. He seems to have children, but all of a sudden, the original design now has gone off kilter. It was supposed to be Adam and Eve, and not Adam and Eve and Beth. And here he's all of a sudden now things are going a little astray, even in relationship with men and women, in such a way as that now there's two wives that are competing, and now you have a husband who is just this bloodthirsty man. I also want to point out in the text is that we look at Genesis as the book of origins, and it gives the origins of the world we talked about, the origins of sin and man's rebellion against God. And here we get some interesting things about the origin of the arts. Who was the guy who kind of first, it says, uh, let's see, his brother's name was Jubal.
Mhm.
These are a couple, I think they're 2 generations later than Lamech, and his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all who played string instruments and pipes. So it's noteworthy for, okay, this is the first music man. And then it says on next we have this guy who was the first guy who worked with bronze and iron. So probably one of the first forgers, or maybe just serious forgers, but that's what the text says. So you're kind of getting these origins of different things in our lives. Well, where did this happen? Where did this come from? Well, it came from this guy at first. At least this is the first record that we have. He was kind of the father of forgery, not pretending you're another person writing something, but
Mhm.
working with metal. And this other guy was the kind of the father of music. But anyways, it's an interesting text, and it shows though that Adam and Eve sin and its results was not a one shot, but immediately you see that this is extending.
Mhm.
And now man is not just living east of Eden, but way east of Eden. And as you said, is a wanderer away from God's presence. And now, as we read, the people just become, it seems like,
Worse and worse.
worse and worse. And then you start to get Noah stuff. Now, we do have a nice little note. It says that people were calling on God's name, but notice they have to call on God's name now. It's not God here, he would just show up with Adam and Eve.
Right, and walk with them in the garden and
Right.
hang out.
And with Cain. And so that sounds good, but in a certain sense, it's a bummer because it shows that they weren't enjoying God's presence as Adam, Eve, and Cain originally did.
Excuse
So
me.
things are moving away from God and his presence. And it's how it is.
Mhm.
That's how life in the world is and how it kept on going.
Mm.
So I think a lot of times, yeah, we focus only on Cain and Abel, first murder, but why is this in here? It's to show that humanity's moving away from God. It just keeps getting worse.
Mhm.
And it wasn't like, oh, it took about 700 years. First child becomes a murderer. First child gets kicked out of God's presence. All right. And he has a descendant who is very proud about murdering others. It just, it's the sad stuff.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I didn't I didn't think of that either. Like I knew Cain murdered his brother, but I didn't really think that. I was just like, "Oh, that's a story." It didn't make me like think that he killed like he it was like a generational thing that we were getting further and further away from God.
yep. That's exactly what's going on in Genesis, and God comes up with the plan. It's not going to work. Oh, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but we know the story of Noah and his ark. But it's not just so Noah is in this ark and he doesn't become part of the flood. God shows in that story that starting anew wasn't the answer either,
Mhm.
because still humanity was around,
Right.
and he still has this sinful nature.
Right. From Adam to Noah, which is chapter 5.
Mhm.
How long do you think that is? How long was humanity just like getting so bad? How
Mhm.
long do you think that was?
Boy, I'd have to sit down and really look at the narrative here. That's kind of hard for me to figure out, but I'm sure somebody has figured it out. But when
Probably.
you think, we do know that Adam lived 930 years. Now, sometimes people will say, "Well, how could people believe when uh, they didn't uh, didn't have the word written like it was for us?" Now, I don't know what languages they wrote in. It's only until the Tower of Babel when you really hear something about language. But here's the deal: they had language. God had communicated with Adam and Eve. And just think about it. If you live 930 years, how many generations can you talk to about something that happened to you? He could have explained to so many people for so many generations, like, this is why life stinks. Look at what happened. Adam and Eve, that's what happened. We sinned, and now
Mhm.
people are dying, and my firstborn was a murderer, And so there was probably a witness to God and what he had done and what he had promised even for many, many years. Actually, now something's coming to me that probably just like 50 years or something, like, it seems like the flood stuff, maybe just 70 years after Adam died, that all this stuff happened. But
Mm.
I'm just, that seems to be something clicking in my mind, but it might be wrong.
Mm. Well, yeah, I think too. Yeah, if well, for one, I don't think Adam and Eve wanted to really talk about the fact that their son killed their other son.
Uh-huh.
So they probably, we now hide our sin.
Uh-huh.
So or even our kids sin, especially our kids sin. So I really feel like they weren't going to talk about that much.
Well, let's see. Let's look at the text. I have to. Isn't maybe? No, I think it is the end of verse 4. When uh, let's check this out. Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, uh, saying, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him." So I've been granted this because I have no other. I need another son, or I lost the son that got killed by my other son,
Mhm.
and now she really had zero sons. She really needed somebody.
Right.
But even in the naming of the son, the murderer is in the background. So Seth also had a son, and he named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord.
Mhm.
But just to tell you, Jesus comes from the line of Seth, not the line of Abel. No, not the line of Cain. So it's kind of interesting that way.